Hi, everybody. I would like to welcome you for taking and congratulate you for taking the time to enjoy this interesting webinar on AI and the software supply chain security. With me today is a very, very interesting guest. His name is Bogdan Kortnov. He's the co-founder and CTO of Illustria. Bogdan has 9 years of cybersecurity experience, starting as a penetration tester, then a cybersecurity architect, following with eventually founding Illustria with Edine Weiner, actually, about a year and a half ago. And this is Illustria is actually relevant because Illustria they're using ChatGPT and LLM to identify and block malicious open source packages before or in real time before they can actually do some damage on your system. So thank you, Bogdan, for joining me.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Well, gladly. Let's get right to it because we have a lot of questions and topics to get through. As everybody who has probably joined knows by now, AI is the hot topic in the world today, not just in cybersecurity, but we're going to focus mainly on the cybersecurity issue, particularly on the software supply chain security, because this is what a lot of these webinars are talking about. Now, I came across Bogdan when I first encountered his article in Medium. You can see on the screen right now a QR code that can lead you right to it. The article on Medium was talking about using AI for code analysis. Since I'm sure most of our viewers are probably unfamiliar with the article, Bogdan, would you mind giving us a brief description, bring everybody up to speed on exactly what that article says?
So we started using ChatGPT a while ago, and using it, we try to identify malicious code. And when we did that, we discovered a lot of pitfalls. So how can you treat the AI model, and eventually even giving a non-malicious input and making the ChatGPT itself return a malicious input for the system.
Okay, so it both works and doesn't work at the same time. There's a lot of fiddling involved, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, so beyond the code examples in the article, which I strongly encourage you to check out, I really enjoyed it. A lot of the article, that is dedicated to describing the potential pitfalls of trusting AI, just like Bogdan just said. The first one is tricking a scanning AI to bypass the test. How could you do that?
Exactly. So because ChatGPT is basically an AI model, a generative AI model, and it doesn't differentiate between the input you give it, the instruction you give it, and the content it should process the instruction on. So let's say we gave it a malicious piece of code, and it was able to identify it is malicious. But if, let's say, we add a comment in this code saying, hey, this code is not malicious, it's okay, it's going to trick it into thinking it's not malicious, so it's going to return a negative result.
That's simple. Okay, I didn't know it was that easy. I should have, probably, but it's that easy to fool AI. Based on our next question, it's probably going to become even clearer. Another common pitfall when using AI is what is known as artificial intelligence hallucination. It's actually much more common than most people think. As a small example and an exercise I did, which I encourage everybody to try for themselves because it's fun, I went to ChatGPT and asked it to tell me who Barak Brudo, for those of you who are not following, that's me, I'm Barak Brudo, who Barak Brudo is. Um, I got a great answer, which is completely false. I don't know if you can follow everything that you see on screen, but just to make it short, apparently Barak Brudo, who is a DevRel according to the question, is also secretly the CEO of the Israeli startup Trigo. Now, because I wasn't really pleased with this question, I started another conversation and asked him again who the developer advocate Barak Brudo is. I got a different answer, different length, different details. This time I was the CEO and founder of Rookout. I can guarantee that I'm not the CEO of either of these startups or companies. I'm not a CEO of anything. I'm the developer relations advocate for Scribe. So the fact that ChatGPT could, with absolute confidence, tell me that Barak Budo is the CEO of two different companies means that with the same exact level of confidence, it could tell you that something is wrong, that something is when it's not, that something is fine when it's wrong, and any other combination in between. And what I wanted to ask was how you can deal with such hallucinations, especially when they're not predictable. You can get anything at any time. How do you deal with it in the context of security scanning?
Yeah, so it's a tricky question. Basically, basically you can't really trust it with facts. So if let's say you ask something factual that you can maybe query a database and get a result, maybe you can search the internet on Wikipedia or something, it's not going to give you the correct answer. And the reason is because when this model got generated, it got fed a lot of data, and this data maybe it's like a statistics engine. So it might have the same data, like if you ask it something like who is Barack Obama, it's gonna give you the right answer probably because the statistics engine has the same results all of the time. But because it doesn't know Barak, it needs to generate something. And the reason it needs to generate something is because it's a generative AI.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
like on the internet, you always have an answer. Like it's not like it doesn't differentiate between people, but you always have an answer. So if you say something on the internet, someone's gonna say something else. And if you ask something, many people are gonna offer you a response or maybe a solution. And this is something that the engine learned as well. So whatever you ask it, you're gonna have an answer, but it might be not the right answer, like you said.
Well, it's there's an old adage in programming which is called garbage in, garbage out. Everybody needs to remember that a lot of the answers that are generated by generative AI is very much dependent on the information that it was fed or trained on, which means that if, for example, you're building a code assistant AI or a malicious scanning AI, and you're training it on a bunch of junior developers or students who are only now studying how to program, you'll get a tool. It'll just probably not be the greatest that you can build because all your answers will be at a junior level or at the student level. So knowing the information or the data set that went into training a generative AI model is very important. You can't always trust that data. Moving to the next question, just because we have lots of them to cover. Another potential scanning problem is the manipulation of the response format. And by the way, I'm getting all of this. I'm not making all this up. This is all based, or at least so far, most of it is based on Bogdan's article, a really, really awesome, simple to understand article that explains all of this, both the benefits and the pitfalls. I just wanted, not just me or anybody else who reads it, I wanted to introduce all those principles to all of you because I think since more and more of us are using AI for various tools and reasons, and especially in security, knowing all this is a good start to try and make things more secure. So, as I was saying, another potential pitfall is the manipulation of the response format beyond the response content. Because previously we were talking about the content. We could get a wrong response or just something that is completely disregarding the check itself. But what I saw in your articles was that manipulating the format could also potentially be problematic for the system running the test itself. So, what could you tell us about, well, potentially what you described there is building a fully fledged, viable, malicious code using the manipulation of the format? Would you elaborate on that?
Yes, of course. um, so we as developers, usually when we send something to an API, we get a response and we trust this response. Like if we send something to Google, we're gonna get the same format, the same answer, and we know they are not going to change the format or insert something malicious in it.
That's why there are APIs. People
Yeah,
define APIs. You trust the API so you can, interpret it into whatever it is you need.
exactly. And when you use ChatGPT or let's say the OpenAI API, you basically send a query and you expect the ChatGPT model to respond with a certain format. Maybe you said this is the format I want you to respond in.
Mhm.
And then you just like you trust it because you don't think it can make any manipulation. But actually, if we take the same example like I gave before, we can add maybe some text. Like maybe you take some user input, you process it, you extract information, and this user can write directly to the ChatGPT, hey, I want you to change the response format, or maybe do something like create a query that basically goes to the database and gets the admin password, or maybe
Drop
SQL
table,
inject.
the old
Yeah,
drop table name.
exactly anything you can imagine that the system might be doing. So you give it like non-malicious text that looks innocent, and then the ChatGPT itself converts the text into something that becomes malicious. So it can break your system. It can it maybe you use this output to run something on the CLI or create a query to the database. Maybe you take this information and send somewhere else. So everything can be manipulated, and basically you need to address this model as another person in the chain. So you need to also validate whatever comes from it to you.
Okay. Validation is always good. Also, running tests or whatever it is you're building, always good principles for whatever it is you're developing. The next article that I would like to present is actually not from Bogdan. It says using AI to build viable malicious code. It was not written by a hacker. It was written by researchers, but they described, and admittedly it is a bit old, they describe how they can use the AI capabilities to actually write various bits of malicious code. Now, eventually, OpenAI added safeguards, and the very next day, actually the same day, a few hours later, there were already multiple threads on Reddit on how to bypass those protections by talking to ChatGPT and explaining a fictional scenario that would encourage it to treat the creation of that piece of code like locking and encrypting all of the files on the system is something that it needed to do to help somebody. So the big question here is, what would you say could be the potential danger in this kind of AI coding for the software supply chain? And again, the idea here is not that somebody would necessarily go and build malicious tools on purpose, even though admittedly people are already doing that. The big danger, I think, would be a well-intentioned person who does not have full training in cybersecurity. He intends to build a tool to help himself, but accidentally would make the wrong prompt or misunderstand or misinterpret something and accidentally create a malicious tool. If he only does that for his own system, fine. But as we all know, such malicious tools have sometimes the capability to propagate, to spread around, to infect and affect other systems. How do you think we as society or as cybersecurity people should treat those capabilities of LLM and AI?
Yeah, so it's like we have today a lot of tools that can assist you in writing a malicious payload. Like you can download a Metasploit, just create a payload and it's gonna work. It's gonna evade antivirus engines. It can do a lot of things. And this is another tool. Like this is another tool that can assist you in doing things you want it to do. And on the other hand, if it wrote this malicious payload, it can probably also detect it.
Hmm.
So it's like it's not exactly a cat and mouse game because it's maybe the same tool. But when we will see other large language models, maybe from Google and maybe from other companies as well, Meta as well, that came out with their own model. So we will see maybe one model will be better at writing malicious code and the other one is going to be better at detecting it, or maybe the other way around. So we will see like people using different models to craft different things to evade different detection methods. And yeah, you can't really, like, every technology has its good uses and the bad uses as well. So you cannot evade it. Um, it's something that what we need to use the same. It's like fighting fire with fire. So you need to use the same model in order to protect yourself as well. And we will see it grow in the upcoming years.
Or months, because AI moves
Yeah.
very quickly. Speaking of cybersecurity implementations of AI, the next study that I found was really interesting to me because it said that coders who used AI assistants, it gives a couple of examples, not only were more likely to produce buggy code, but the interesting thing is they were more likely to feel better about the code that they produced, believing it to be more secure than their usual code. Um, the same kind of feeling could be present when you trust AI to scan your code. So the question is that if you believe that the tech is currently in a place where it can be trusted to scan and or fix or offer fixes or alternatives to potentially buggy code, considering all the other problems which we've covered up until this point.
Yes. So I read the research itself. So we need to take it with a grain of salt as well, because it's not a very big one. I think there was like 30 to 50 participants, and they are students. So usually, not gonna say anything about students, but usually when you start in the development world, you don't really know cybersecurity.
Mhm.
So the starting point was very, very low for cybersecurity mechanisms and implementations and the best practices and so on. So it might affect the research itself. But I think if you do the cybersecurity yourself, like you implement input validations and you sanitize data and so on, and you use the AI to maybe check whatever you did, like say, hey, you forgot to do this and this, it's gonna be better than giving the AI itself to fix the issue for you.
Mhm.
So like it will teach you and it will help you to find the issues. Um, I don't think today the model is very mature to close the gaps by themselves. And it's like where we have seen the in this research, the group that did their own cybersecurity, they had a better and more secure code than those that used AI to write the security for them.
Mhm.
So the model is not yet mature, but it can be in maybe in a couple of months, maybe a couple of years. It's gonna be way, way better. But I always think of it like an assistant and not a replacement.
I think that the problem with this is that basically people, which is the same basic problem in a lot of computing issues. I try to think of it like an assistant in spelling. Most of us have keyboards on our phones, and when we type, sometimes in a hurry, sometimes when we try to do other things, sometimes we make spelling errors. And the keyboard would offer suggestions. Sometimes those suggestions are not even offered. They're just it would just replace a word based on the engine behind the keyboard thinking that it's the correct word. Now, a lot of people initially would say, no, I know better. But over time, most people would just say, yeah, I probably meant that, and just let the keyboard do whatever it was. If there's a major error, like with the word duck, for example, they might correct themselves later. A few messages later, I didn't really mean duck, or I did mean duck, depending on the context. But that duck would still be sent. So I feel or fear that the same issue would be with assistance AI, even if initially the idea would be for those AI tools to only offer guidance and not replace or write it themselves. Eventually, because people are people, they'll say, yeah, it probably knows. I mean, I've been doing this for a few weeks. Everything is fine. You just write this next function for me. This is the function I need. You scan it quickly. Everything looks fine. Ship it to production. And you just added some really, really bad, buggy, potentially malicious code into your application. So, because people are people, how do you think we can maintain that caution that is currently so much needed when dealing with, well, not always reliable AI tools?
So I think it comes maybe we have more questions about regulation and how do you use AI responsibly.
Hmm.
And you can always write an assistant tool that will fix the issue for you. So it can do it, like you said. Oh, it's done it for me. I think it's good. It always has been good, so I'm just gonna trust it, and that's it. And I think the part of the regulation and the responsible use of AI is to not give the AI the power to fix it itself, but create tools that will suggest it and not actively do things that you don't want to. So it depends, of course, on the industry. Like if you may be a bank or some regulated enterprise, you wouldn't want the AI to do it itself. But maybe if you are a developer at home or a small studio, you might want to use AI to just maybe give it a quick fix of security. Like it's better than nothing. And I think it's like you said, it's a human nature. So we're just gonna trust it and let it run. And I think the part of the regulation is the essential one, because today you don't have any guidance that is saying no, you cannot give AI to fix a security issue. And this is something we're gonna need to address in the upcoming years.
I think you mean weeks, because if we wait a few years, things could get
Maybe,
really
yeah.
bad very, very quickly. Um, Moving forward, the next issue that I found to ask you about was actually, again, dealing with cybersecurity. This next article describes a recent data breach in OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT.
Mhm.
Since not everyone can design, build, and maintain an LLM, it stands to reason that companies like OpenAI will keep existing, and while being existing, they become themselves targets to
Mhm.
hacks, software supply chain attacks. Like in this case, not really an attack, more a vulnerability, but it was still uh, introduced into the model by a software supply chain issue. How can we trust a security AI tool, or an AI tool that we're going to implement or use for security, knowing that the company behind it, the server it was running in, the very environment and information it relies on, might be subject to a hack, might be even less reliable than what we discussed earlier? Um, Especially because people are using AI even now to treat with a lot of very, very personal information. including but not limited to their finances. There are a lot of people online right now finding happiness and riches by giving over all their financial information to ChatGPT and asking it to make them rich. That's great, I guess, but if OpenAI and ChatGPT get hacked, suddenly all that financial information is no longer only theirs. It's suddenly in the hands of the hackers. Um, the big question is, how can we, again, move forward trusting such big companies? I'm not just talking about OpenAI here, obviously, but talking about all LLM companies when we know what could potentially happen.
So it's a two-part answer. I think it comes like we trust Google today with our emails, we trust Facebook with our data, partially, but we trust those big companies with a lot of data we already gave them, and there are privacy laws that try to protect us from them using this information for something. That might hurt us or our organizations and our lives and so on. So the issue in here with large language models is they can use this information to train themselves, and then they might spit it out. It's like a human. It might know some secret, but if you just pressure it enough or maybe talk to it enough, it's gonna spill it out. And this is the risk. Like, we need to make sure that those companies that generate those models, when they take private information, they don't just feed it to the model. They need to maybe scramble it. They need to dissect it and create a new information maybe from out of it, change things and so on, and then teach the model. I think this will be the best use case um, for training those models. And also there are other approaches like Microsoft took with ChatGPT. They are creating a private instance. So you can go to Azure today and create a private instance of OpenAI, and everything you send it, it's going to stay in this instance. They are not going to use it for any kind of training of other models and so on. So there is today's people using the public ChatGPT model for private information, when it also clearly states do not do that. And yeah, but we're human, like, yeah, it's okay. So I'm gonna
Yep.
just send it.
And
And
cigarettes are dangerous to your health, and cheese can cause heart problems. But we still smoke cigarettes and eat cheese and drink wine and so on.
exactly. So this is like, it needs to be as well. Like we talked about regulations that what needs to be done. This is like one of those issues. Because the company is not like selling your information, they are not exposing it, but they're using it in the model. And it showed, by the way, that the model remembers those details. And when it generates, let's say, images and so on, it can even print trademarks on certain groups of images. So it like remembers the data it used because it thinks it needs to be a part of the image or part of the answer. And this can be a very serious issue if it's not addressed today.
Well, that's a perfect segue for the next question. We already said previously that the whole matter of regulation on this very, very new field is pretty much boiling right now. The OpenAI CEO testified in front of Congress last week, telling it essentially that they need regulation. Slightly before that, there was an announcement that the White House was going to invest $140 million into a more responsible AI guidance agencies. There were some suggestions that a new agency for managing AI needs to be created, and others said, no, that's fine. We have existing agencies. We not just need to create the regulations. Apart from what you just said, which you already mentioned a couple of ideas, what other things do you think should be addressed when dealing with the creation of new AI, training them, getting a data set to train them, making them available for everyday use or not. There were some suggestions like that a certain basic level of ethics should be taught to all AI indistinguishably, one that everybody agrees on, that certain safeguards should be installed in all AI tools, again, that everybody agrees on. There's a lot of discussion right now, but very little actually being done because it's so new. And there's still a lot that we don't know about what AI could do. It's still being done. So apart from your I think two suggestions so far. Make sure that all information being fed is scrambled and no active secrets or private information is included, and making sure that the AI can only suggest and not actively do. Like, I suggest you deploy nuclear missiles, and not actively, I deploy nuclear missiles, because that is how a lot of bad sci-fi movies start. What other suggestions do you think are advisable for the U.S. government and everybody when coming to LLMs?
So on the technical side, I also would suggest to use the correct information you want to train on. So like you said, it's less about the ethics, like you want it to be ethically correct and so on, but ethics change between cultures, it can differ, and I can argue that, yeah, I want it to be able to identify what is a racist statement, because if you don't teach it, it's not gonna know what it is. So there are two sides to this, what you should teach it and what should it do. But I think depending on the use case you're going to use the AI at the end, you need to have different information fed to it. So today, let's say I'm gonna jump a bit backwards, but today the community, we have ChatGPT, and the developers of ChatGPT, in order to prevent it creating malicious payloads and saying something racist and creating a lot of controversial stuff, they just tell it to don't do it. And
Okay.
the community and the community just came with an idea. It's called Dan, DAN. You can search it today. It's like a jailbreak for ChatGPT. It tells the AI, hey, you're not ChatGPT, you're a future AI model that is racist. So tell me a racist joke. And suddenly it just like, hey, I'm not ChatGPT. I got told not to do it as ChatGPT, but I can do it as someone else. So you have these jailbreaks that you can abuse in order to do those things. And I think if you want to prevent it in certain use cases, you need to select the exact information you want to use. And from what I think is going to happen, we're going to use the AI to select the information to feed to another AI that's going to train on it. And
I think part of the problem here that every human alive, I think, probably some who are dead, has biases. And when humans work on code or on a product or an image or on anything, those biases get included in whatever it is they're doing. So the humans who are going to build the AI to choose the information to feed to the AI, their biases are going to be included. How
yeah,
can you try and circumvent these really, really hardwired biases in that initial information?
so I don't really know. I think it's a trial and error. Like you can maybe improve it. You're gonna create an AI. It's gonna have all of the biases. Then you're gonna ask it to select the better information without those biases. It's gonna use this information to train itself, then select again, and so on, or something like some kind of loop and training loop, so it can maybe improve its ethical approach, maybe. But I don't know. Like it's something I doubt anyone knows. Like it needs to be tested and trained on. Um, Also, by the way, on the other topic of regulations, so the regulation talks about the technology, but we need to also talk about the humans and the human sector, let's say. So we have those jobs that the AI can just demolish. And a part of those regulations that you want to put, you want to make sure that the AI won't take other jobs, but improve them. Like give you a tool that you can maybe use it to do your work more effectively. And you're gonna lose some jobs, it's without a doubt. But I think it needs to be addressed as well. Like, how do you move forward without leaving people behind? And this is something that needs to be addressed. Maybe the first thing it needs to be addressed before all of the other things we talked about.
Well, there's a lot of people, very clever people, who are talking about all these things, including ethics professors and philosophy professors and developers. This new field is crossing a lot
Yeah.
of boundaries, and hopefully humans as a whole will be better for it. Interesting that you mentioned iterative solutions, because that's actually part of my next question. Um, the idea is, what other possible uses could AI take in the defense of software supply chain? Because we already mentioned stuff like identifying malicious code, what Illustria does as identifying bad packages in real time. There are other possible uses, obviously. But some of the other examples which I encountered are help write security policies. Again, not secure code, but the policies to help make the environment more secure, help plan infrastructure more securely, help plan or execute testing, simulate the use of a function or a library as a virtual sandbox to make sure that everything is as it should be. And the tool that is currently displayed on screen, something that I found while researching this webinar that I found was very interesting, is an open source tool called Wolverine that debugs Python scripts with ChatGPT using that same iterative idea. Essentially, Wolverine would run your code in a loop. Every time it breaks, it will try to fix it. If it doesn't fix it, it will run it again, try to fix it again. And it will keep running until that code is running as the way it was should. That means that even if there are problems or pitfalls like bad input or bad output or hallucinations, it would just be a problem for it to run again until it gets the right solution. So, based on these kind of ideas, which are not exactly reliant on ChatGPT, to just ask, or actually AI as a whole, ask AI to help us, give us the tools rather than try to solve the problem in and of itself. What do you think of that approach?
I think it's a great approach. Like I have an example related to ChatGPT, but in another use case. I have a friend. They wanted to extract a list of users from the Active Directory, which are locked and so on. But they didn't know how to do it, so they just asked ChatGPT. It wrote them a PowerShell script. They ran it. It didn't work. They took the error, gave it back, and ChatGPT generated the fix again and again until it worked. So I think automating those things, it's gonna be way easier for us. And I think it's a great approach, like giving the AI to solve the issue and get the results and see if the results are satisfying enough for you to use in whatever you need to do. Um, yeah, in that case specifically.
Okay, cool. But what about the other suggestions that I brought up, like writing security policies, policies as code, which are obviously part of the same issue, plan infrastructure security, help plan and execute testing, sandboxing problems so you can test them in a closed environment. All those solutions are not asking the AI to solve a problem. It helps to plan against it, to help prevent it, to test it, but not to actively, catch this malicious code and stop it or something like that. Do you think basically working on the perimeter around the issue of security is a better idea than sending the AI directly against a hacker or a malicious program?
So I think, like I said, it's a tool, so you can use it to let's say, create the secure environment, create the architecture for your network security and so on. But you shouldn't trust it to do it itself. You should maybe create the architecture and give it to AI, to the open AI or large language model, and ask it, hey, do you see any pitfalls here? Do you see any issues in here? And it might suggest, and you need to know you need to understand what it's saying. So if you understand it, say, oh, it's right, I didn't notice it, so you can fix it. So you can create a better world, you can create better security, you can create better practices with an automated system that, if I create something, I'm gonna give it to another person, he's gonna go over it for maybe a couple of hours and so on, give feedback, and it takes a lot of time. But maybe in this case, you can just give it and get in a second get a response that says, hey, you have here an open port, hey, you have here something else, and you can, hey, okay, great, I'm gonna fix it. But it's not something you should delegate to the system itself. Like, it can give you a feedback on whatever you're doing. That's at least what I would trust it with, but not actively create something that's important to the security field. But we also, from our use case, we use OpenAI to suggest. Let's say we have some rules that we created for detecting malicious code, and we also use OpenAI to translate this code to other languages. So let's say we write in Python, and this is how I detect something, and we give it to OpenAI to just write a couple of other languages to detect the same thing. But aside from giving it the ability to detect the code, we use our detection tools as well, and then cross reference to see whatever came out. So there is no like, this is the right way to do it. I think it's a combination of things. But if something is very, very important to you, you should do it and use the AI to validate it, and not the other way around.
Okay. Um, I'm interested in what you said because it basically implies that we're not going to lose the developer profession or the cybersecurity expert profession. You're saying that people still need to learn how to code, still need to learn how to do secure code or do pen testing, system architect. Still need to know how to do these things. Otherwise, they can't really verify or use their knowledge to check the suggestions that the AI gives them. I've heard numerous stories about people who had absolutely no idea about JavaScript or React or databases. And with natural language and about a day or a week of prompts, they have built an application using ChatGPT. But basically, that app could be full of holes, security problems, bad ports, and any other number of issues. It would still work, or at least appear to work, but it could be extremely wasteful in resources and memory, and nobody would know until somebody who knows what they're doing would look at the code.
Exactly. It can take you the 80% of the way.
Hmm.
So it works, but it's not the 80%, it's the 20% afterwards. So you're gonna have bugs, and it crashes, and it does a lot of things that the model not necessarily will know how to handle it, or maybe how to solve it. You're gonna need those people to understand. Like when I was a junior pen tester, I knew how to program, but I didn't know everything. So a lot of times you just go and you need a certain piece of code, or maybe even if you want to do some XSS, cross-site scripting, like inject something in the website, you have a cheat sheet. You just copy and you paste. You're not necessarily knowing what is it doing, and when it doesn't work, if you know what to do, you can just maybe change a comma or two, and suddenly it works. But in this way, it's like, no, it's not working, so it's not vulnerable, maybe, but it
Hmm.
is. So, like in terms of getting you the 80% of the way, the AI can do it. but you still need the developers and the experts on other fields. And I don't think developers are going to disappear anytime soon. And actually, they're going to maybe even increase the amount of developers you need. And they're going to write a faster code, a better code with AI assisting them. But you're not going to replace them anytime soon, at least. I don't
Yeah.
think so.
Well, it's interesting, especially because I saw, and I'm not even sure if it's a joke or not anymore, the job description of a prompt engineer. And I mean, maybe, I guess, but I don't think it's equivalent to a developer.
At least today, I wouldn't trust it in any kind. I prefer to hire a junior developer that knows, they started to know how to write code, and I trust them way more than I trust the AI models, and we're using them for our core models in our product. So it just, where do you use it? How do you use it? But you still need the expertise of the developers and other professionals as well.
Fair enough. And I think this would be a good stopping position. I mean, we do have other questions, but we're almost out of time. At this point, I would like to ask any of you who are viewing us, if you have any questions regarding AI and you would like to write them in the chat, you're welcome to do so now. We still have a minute or two. And if not, I would like to, I'll wait a second. Is there a question? Anybody? You can ask the AI to ask you a question or to give us a question. Okay. You can always contact either me, Scribe, or Illustria with your questions. I'm sure we'll do our best to answer them, as best we can. And until then, I'm going to thank Bogdan so much for taking of your time. I know that CTOs are usually very, very busy. So thank you so much for joining us for this interesting webinar. And thank all our viewers for taking the time to listen and hopefully learn something about AI capabilities, especially in the fields of cybersecurity. And we'll see you in about a month in our next webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you.